Dr. Will Wheat here again, and this is part 2 of realizing the power of desire, taught by Dr. John Mastrogiovanni. Again, just like part 1, part 2 is informative. Kind of left you hanging at the end of part 1 so that you would be interested in listening to the rest of this video. Stay tuned, take good notes, and I promise you by the time the video ends, you will have been totally immersed into revelation. And this revelation that God is immersing you into will help you lay a hold of your identity and be whom He called you to be, who He created you to be. You are all that God created you to be and nothing less. Enjoy this video. See you at the end.
Lucifer was not, hear me out now, Lucifer was not just a guy that we've labeled the devil, and he's out there somewhere doing bad things to us and making Hurricane Harvey and Irma and all that stuff. No. Lucifer is a state of being. Lucifer is a state. Halil is a state. It's a state of receiving the light and reflecting it back. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, I realize for some of us, what just happened is you're trying to get a square peg in a round hole. Because I've always been taught it's the devil, he's Lucifer, he's bad, etc. Well, actually, these are states of being, regardless of what the being is. You see, in the spiritual world, what defines closeness is not proximity. What's your name, my dear? Tony. And you are again?
Yeah.
Ornetta. Okay. Technically, I'm closer to Tony than I am to Ornetta. But if I sit back like this and I put a book in my hand here and I have my arm like this, I'm mirroring her. In the spiritual world, I'm closer to her than I am to Tony because I resemble her. Likeness. Likeness defines closeness, not proximity. Okay? The catch is, the more like that's revealed, the more one you are. And as Rabbi Ara Kaplan says, there's no such thing of two angels with the same name, because if they, two angels with the same function, because if they had the identical function, there'd only be one angel. So that, in other words, likeness becomes so close that you can't not only just tell them apart, they are actually the one creature. So when you think about it, most of us, when we think of being the image of God, we think of the mirror. But actually the image of God is what's inside the mirror that's reflecting back, correct? That's the image. Now here's the point. Isn't that God? When, Tony, you walk up into a mirror and you're looking in the mirror, isn't that image you?
Yes.
Okay. Now you can't, thank you, you can't walk away from that image and that image still stay there, right?
Right.
Okay, because it's you. Okay, so now when you think of, you're the image and likeness of God, it's more than just saying, God's over there and I'm trying to be like Him. You're an emanation of God. Rabbi David Aaron says it this way very beautifully. You maybe have heard me say it before. If God is the sun, you are His rays. If God is the dancer, then you are His dance. You can't separate it. But what egoism does, that I will, that dust of the earth substance, that egoism, what it does is believe it's separated from. Let's take this further, show you how it works a little bit. Famous verse in Genesis 1, 3 through 4. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. Now I want to focus in on that last phrase. God divided the light from the darkness. How do you divide light from dark? You really can't. If you think about it, for the most part, the way we think. Now believe it or not, there is a Hebraic way to do it. I'm going to show you how that's done. But you can't just, either the light's on, the candle's lit, or it's not. How do you change that. You don't see a piece of darkness floating around in this room right now. It doesn't work that way. Unless that little phrase, God divided the light from the darkness, and the key word there is for divided. It's what that means and in its root. If you think about it, if you were to go out in the Mojave Desert right now, and let's say it was so overcast that there's no stars in the sky, no moon at night. I've been out there one time that way. That was a whole another story. I was 19 years old with a friend of mine, and you don't go into the desert on street motorcycles. But we did it anyway, which means we traveled like 10 miles an hour, slipping and sliding in the sand. It was terrible. It was horrible. But we drove for hours into the desert this way. It's got to be crazy to do that, but we did it. And that night it was viciously overcast to the point where you could not see, thank you, sir, you could not see your hand in front of your face. That's how dark it was. And what's interesting is when we turned on, even had the light on of our motorcycles, the beam just went into darkness. Couldn't see anything. Didn't change the fact. The only time it would be useful is if something came right in front of it.
Wow.
And that's really the case. And our Hebrew brothers and sisters understood. They were nomadic people. They lived in the deserts. They took these long journeys, like in the wilderness, etc. They understood darkness from this standpoint. And they also understood that if you light a candle, it doesn't illuminate much. So here's the thing. So if you take a flashlight and like we did, and shine it out in front of you in the Mojave Desert when it's cast over like that, nothing is illuminated. You're not going to see what's going on. Why? Because something has to happen to the light. So we erected a tent in the dark that way. And what was interesting is when we stepped from outside into the tent, we actually didn't know we were in the tent until we felt it, because it was just as dark outside as it was inside. Until we turned the light on. Then all of a sudden, whoosh, everything lit up. Why? Because of the canvas, or the nylon actually, those tent, the screen, the canvas walls of the tent reflected the light, and everything was illuminated. Dividing the light from the darkness is speaking of this concept called the masach in Hebrew, the screen. When I erect a screen, no different than maybe in church you have a projector, or you go to a movie house and there's a screen. If there was no screen, there was no wall, it was just an open field behind where you were sitting in the movie house, and you turned on a projector, absolutely nothing would happen. But the second you drop the screen, all of a sudden not only is light seen reflected back, but all the images you can't see in the beam of light are revealed right before you on the screen. So what happens then is the screen reflects the light. Well, the power of this reflection is then what you see on the screen is the image of the source. Does that make sense? So think of it this way. Without you, there is no revelation of the Creator, because you are part of this fabric of the screen that reveals who He is. And by erecting the screen, you now separate light from darkness. Darkness is not evil. Darkness is that desire to receive, if you will. It's the void, the absence of the light. And it has no quality in and of itself except to simply receive. But when I raise the masach, the anti-egoistic thinking or feelings, see, now in a sense what I've done is put the ego in its place. When I've done that, now a reflection happens and I reveal the Creator. Make sense?
Yes.
So we've been taught that the soul is mind, will, and emotions. But what it doesn't tell us is that particular substance the soul is made of. It only tells us how the soul manifests, like in the picture over here. If I said to you water is solid, liquid, and gas, that's true. That's how water manifests. But I didn't tell you the substance water was made of. By the teaching we've had, which is that Greco-Roman point of view, it's not wrong necessarily. The soul is mind, will, and emotions, but it doesn't tell me what the substance of the soul is made up of. So, like water, which is made up of 2 molecules of hydrogen and oxygen, the functioning soul is also made up of 2 aspects: the desire to receive and that which fills it, which is the desire to give, or the breath of God. The key factor is this masach, like the covalent bond of water molecules. It's this bonding element. It's what binds the hydrogen and oxygen together. And that's really what the key is here. It's this screen. It's this state of being that receives, but not selfishly, receives to emanate and give. So in similar fashion, like receiving and reflecting the light, the analogy of breath can be used. As God breathes into Adam the breath of life, the creature inhales, but Adam didn't just inhale. He had to exhale. To be alive, you have to inhale and exhale. So he inhales, then exhales. This mouth to mouth, or nostril to nostril. He uses the word nostril in Hebrew, breathe into his nostrils. Well, that's the Hebrew word there, af, which simply means passion. If you really think about it, it's this passionate, heavy breathing between creator and creation, like a man and a woman, in intimacy. It's a description of the intimacy of life. God breathes into the atom, and the atom breathes into God. Total union, oneness. Yechida in Hebrew, the total oneness of God. And this is really what we're about. In Hebrews 10:39, it says in the New King James Version, we are not those who draw back to perdition, but of those who believe to the saving of the soul. In the New American Standard, it says to the preserving of the soul. In the Aramaic New Testament, it says faith that possesses our soul. The soul's important. Why? Because the soul is that substance that God is using for you to receive and reflect. A soul that is in its fallen mindset, a satanic mindset, is one that receives for itself, egoistic. A soul that's elevated back to its original state is Halil, Lucifer, the morning star, reflecting the light. Does that make sense? So it's about being those beams of light. It's about being the dance that the dancer performs. So if a Levite, it says in Deuteronomy 18:6-7, so if a Levite comes from any of your gates, from where he dwells among all Israel, and comes with all the desire of his mind, and that word desire there, guess what? It says the desire of his soul. In Psalms 145:19, he will fulfill the desire of those who revere him. He will fulfill the desire. And the Hebrew phrase there, it's right here, is that word ratzon again that I told you about. The word for earth, ratzon, the desire to receive. It's imperative that we realize desire is the key to everything. Matthew 15:21, then Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, saying, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed. But he answered her not a word. I don't know about you, but it's like, hey, Jesus, what happened to, Mr. Love Guy? Right? He answered her not a word. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, send her away. She cries out after us. But he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered and said, it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Jesus! Check, what happened? Jesus, meek and mild, what happened to you? Treating this woman like that. And she said, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. That Greek word is thelesis, your desire. It comes from the Greek word thelo, which means what you crave again. We're right back to the craving, desire, the want. If you think about it, Jesus was not being rude. What he was doing was developing desire. See, at first she came, as many of us do, we get into a situation, this is where the ego comes in many times, and we think we're being spiritual. We come to Jesus. Oh, Lord Jesus, my situation's demon-possessed. Help me out. And really what we're saying is, my ego is very uncomfortable. I don't like being in this situation, and I want it to stop. Really. And you know what Jesus does? Doesn't say a word. Because he's interested in building the desire, the screen, the masach that's going to bring the reflection. So then she wises up for a minute and says, okay, well, wait a minute. Right, Jesus, God. Okay, fine. That means I got to worship. Hallelujah. I'm worshiping God now. So now I'm doing my paganistic worship, just doing it with a Jesus title. Right? Oh, I bless you, Lord. Thank you so much. We do it, some of these things, and some of it is just paganism. With same script, different actors. That's all. And then when she's worshiping, she cries out, right? And she's worshiping, and he says it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Wait a minute, I'm worshiping. I am worshiping with the latest gospel song that's in the What's Happening Now album of Christianity.
Wow.
And he calls her old dog. Wait a minute, what is he? He's trying to build something in her. He's trying to get her to look like him for a moment. Well, finally, when she says, yes, Lord, but even the little dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Notice now, there's no ego in that statement. There's a humility that's there. But that, with the same desire for a result, now creates the reflection. And he says, wow, that's great faith. And then he says, let it be to you as you desire. Your desire determines the faith you have. Most of us have a lot of beliefs, but they're not faith-based desires. Let's do this, We're going to take a moment, take a break, and then come back and finish this up, okay?
Only God's plan for salvation will work. Father, what will you have me do? What will you have me say? And to whom? What is salvation, Father? I do not know. Tell me that I may understand.